V apocalypse. By the late 22nd century, the world no longer felt like it belonged to the living. The collapse began with a brief but catastrophic nuclear war between China and Iran. Entire regions of Asia and the Middle East vanished in fire and radiation. Oceans near the coast boiled. The sky stayed grey for years. Terrified by what they had unleashed, the surviving nations erased nuclear weapons from existence. Every record destroyed, every scientist silenced. But humanity did not learn peace. It learned desperation. The Communist Coalition of America, the CCA, rose hard and ruthless. Europe, fractured and weak, became the new enemy. Without nuclear weapons, the CCA turned to disease. Viruses left no ruins to rebuild, only empty cities and silence. Europe resisted. The European allies were outnumbered and poorly armed, but they held the frozen front lines across the barren wastelands of former Russia. Behind them, cities starved. Children grew up never seeing a blue sky. The war dragged on until the CCA released COVID-22. Paired with a mutated rabies strain, the virus tore through Europe. Victims died violent and screaming. Hospitals collapsed in weeks. Nearly half of Europe's remaining population was gone within a year. The dead were buried in trenches so deep, they became part of the landscape. Still, the CCA wanted more. Their scientists created a new virus, one meant to turn soldiers into weapons. It stripped away fear, pain, and the need for sleep, replacing it with strength and an uncontrollable thirst for blood. The vampire virus worked. It shattered European defenses. Cities fell not to armies, but to their own infected defenders. Yet the virus could not be controlled. Entire units turned feral. Some escaped. Others fed on their creators. A vaccine was eventually developed in Europe. Not a cure, but a restraint. Before it could be used, a new dictatorship seized power in the CCA and abandoned the war entirely. The world was left infected. Alice woke before dawn, as she always did. The laboratory beneath Sardinia hummed softly, powered by aging reactors salvaged from the old world. The air smelled of salt, metal, and recycled oxygen. For a moment she lay still, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the distant roar of the sea above her. Today was the day. She swung her legs from the narrow bed and rubbed tired eyes. She was young again, or at least she looked it. The years had been taken from her by necessity, by stolen treatments and controlled gene resets, developed in desperation. Everyone important to the project had been made young. Old bodies could not survive the work ahead. She dressed quickly and moved through the corridors, passing maps of a broken world. Europe marked in red. Vampire strongholds circled like open wounds. Blood farms labeled, but never fully erased from memory. Alice spent the morning checking calculations she had checked 1,000 times before. Saline dispersal ratios, atmospheric saturation, rainfall probability. One error, and the planes would fail. Or worse, the rain would do nothing at all. Her hands shook as she worked. It wasn't fear for herself. It was fear for Simon. Simon, her husband, her anchor, her last constant, was in charge of the flight operation. He commanded the remaining human air fleet, patched together aircraft, built from wreckage and hope. They would fly directly into vampire-controlled airspace, where ancient defense systems still hunted anything that dared cross the skies. It would be like the Blitz of the Second World War, Alice thought. Planes flying into fire, knowing many would not return. She found Simon on the runway, above ground, shouting orders over the wind. He wore a pilot's jacket far too thin for the cold, and smiled when he saw her, though his eyes betrayed him. "They'll shoot at us the moment we cross the coast," he said, calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I know," Alice replied, "but if you don't fly high enough, the vapor won't spread. And if we fly too high," Simon said quietly, "we won't come back." They held each other briefly. No speeches, no promises, They had learned long ago that words did not stop death. By midday, the planes were ready. The assault began over Spain. Human ground forces advanced through ruined cities as the planes rose into the clouds above them. Anti-air fire tore the sky apart. Aircraft burned and fell like dying stars. Simon's voice crackled over the radio, steady, refusing to acknowledge the chaos around him. Then, the vapor was released. High above the battlefield, the clouds darkened unnaturally. The first drops fell slowly, then harder, heavier. Rain soaked the streets, filled craters, streamed down shattered walls. Vampires screamed. Their skin blistered and split as the salt burned them from the outside in. Strength drained from bodies that had ruled for centuries. They fled into buildings that quickly flooded with poisoned water. Some begged, some raged. None survived the storm. Simon's plane took fire on the return run. It limped back across the sea, engines coughing, wings torn, but it landed. Alice watched the rain spread across Europe, then beyond. Every city, every fortress, every blood farm. Survivors were forced to drink salted water, weakening them until they could be destroyed. The vampire virus finally faded. Humanity survived. Barely. The world was quiet again. Too quiet. But it was human. People settled near the sea, where salt still protected them. Cities were smaller, simpler, cautious. Children were taught to test rain with their fingers before stepping outside. Alice and Simon grew old this time, naturally, together. And when storms gather and clouds darken, the world still remembers the day the sky itself became a weapon, and salt fell like judgment from above. Years passed after the salt rains, but peace never fully settled. Simon knew better. Rumors traveled along the coastlines and island routes, whispers of disappearances, of drained bodies found far from the sea. One name surfaced again and again: Maximus, the last vampire leader, a creature who had ruled from the shadows long before the war ended. He was hiding in the ruins of Vatican City. The Holy City had become a fortress of stone. Its underground vaults, catacombs, and sealed archives made it the perfect hiding place. Sunlight barely reached the depths. Salt water could not flow there naturally. And buried beneath centuries of history were the last surviving records of the vampire virus. Plans, formulas, experiments waiting to be rediscovered. Simon volunteered without hesitation. He traveled inland with a small human strike force, hardened survivors armed with fire, salt charges, and old-world weapons. As they crossed the dead cities of Italy, the air grew heavy, as if the land itself remembered what had been done there. The Vatican was silent when they arrived. No bells rang, no lights burned, only dust and shadows. The first soldiers attacked at night. Feral remnants, loyal to the end. They moved fast but clumsily, weakened by years without proper blood. Simon led from the front, firing salt rounds and driving blades dipped in brine straight through blackened hearts. Fire followed. The corridors filled with smoke and screams. They pushed deeper. Beneath the great basilica, past collapsed tombs and shattered altars, Simon found him. Maximus waited in a ruined chamber lined with books and scorched papers. He looked almost human, tall, pale, dressed in rotting ceremonial robes. His eyes glowed faintly red and furious. "You cannot erase us," the vampire said calmly. "Someone will always want this power." Simon raised his weapon. "That's why I'm here." The fight was brutal. The vampire was strong, even weakened, moving with inhuman speed. Simon was thrown across the chamber, bones cracking, blood filling his mouth. But sunlight streamed through a collapsed ceiling above them, just enough. Simon triggered the last charge. Salt dust exploded into the air like a white storm. The vampire screamed as his skin burned and split. Simon dragged himself forward and drove a blade into the creature's chest, holding it in the light until it stopped moving, until it was nothing but ash and torn cloth. Silence followed. Simon did not leave immediately. For days, the humans burned everything. Every book, Every hard drive, every preserved sample and hidden archive. The ancient libraries were reduced to ash. The underground labs collapsed into fire and rubble. Nothing was saved. Nothing was remembered. When Simon and his team finally walked out of Vatican City, smoke rose into the sky like a funeral pyre for the old world. Nobody or nothing remained. The virus was gone, forever. Simon returned to his home, to Alice, who was waiting for news. And day after day, humanity slowly rose from the ashes of the devastated wasteland to a world that could finally begin again. The end